Charlie, can you start us off by offering a short prayer for us, please?
Gracious Father God, thank you, Heavenly Father. Thank you for this day, Lord. Thank you that you have taught us together to listen to your word. We ask your blessing and bless the teacher, Father God, as he brings the word this evening, Father God. Give him strength, give him the wisdom and knowledge and your understanding, Father God. And let us open our hearts to receive the word, Father God. Gracious Father, we thank you and praise you for the word this day. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Thank you, Brother Charlie. Okay. Okay, this morning's lesson was titled More Than Conquerors. And then I read the lesson, and Paul had only mentioned the term conquerors. He'd only mentioned that one time in the lesson, whereas the word love and attitude, he mentioned that 4 times. So looking at the numbers, it was just logical to me that being as how he mentioned love so many times, more than conqueror, that love would have been a better title. So that's why I lean towards love and charity this morning. Now for this afternoon, I didn't rule out conquerors. And when I first read the title of the Sabbath school lesson, Conquerors, I started thinking, well, maybe I could make a good Bible study using the term conquerors. When I think of the word conqueror, I think of military tactics. You know?
Conquering nations.
Conquering nations.
That's right.
Because we've had some great people to do that. And these great people, by the grace of God, affects our lives today. So I thought it would be good and that it might be enjoyable if we would just kind of briefly touch on the lives of some of the conquerors that have passed through during ancient history and modern history and possibly even today. Now we know that God is the one that sets up conquerors.
Amen.
He sets up the kings. He sets up the queens. He sets up presidents and any other influential, powerful office. God is the orchestrator. And he sets a time limit on the kings, and he sets a time limit on the presidents. So either way it goes, God is always working in the scene. Even though he doesn't always get the credit, and he may not always get the good thoughts, God is there. Or there is a verse that I remember, and that verse is pertaining to the eyes of the Lord. How does it go, Sister Joyce? The eyes of the Lord run to and fro, to and fro.
Behold the land, the shores are strong.
Upon the earth.
Right, right.
Strong on behalf of those whose hearts are faithful to the Lord.
Right, very good. I know I can depend on you, Sister
Not
Joyce.
the word, I think I'm good. I don't put that paper, I don't have it in my mind.
Yeah.
Push paper.
Lord, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro, run back and forth, back and forth. So he doesn't miss a thing.
That's right.
Okay. And he setteth up kings, and he puts down kings. And to me, a king there's no difference between a king and a president, just the name. In ancient times, they were called kings, and that maybe one or two countries still left today that use that term king.
Monarchy.
Monarchy. But we use the name presidents. Or, what's the other one? It's
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister. Very good, Pastor. I like that. Very good. Okay. The word conquerors resonated with me. So we will start our lesson by discussing the lives of a few men that were great conquerors of the world. We will start with the person, Alexander. Anybody ever heard of Alexander?
The great.
Alexander the Great.
Yeah, the Great. Alexander the Great. He was set up by God. He was set up at an early age. He lived to be, well, he was born July the 20th, 356 BC. Alexander III of Macedon. He lived from July 21, 356 BC to June 11, 323 BC, about 33 years. Now that's kind of parallel, it's kind of common to who else? Jesus, very good. Alexander was commonly known as Alexander the Great, a Greek of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedon, born in Pella in 356 BC. Alexander succeeded his father, Philip II, to the throne at the age of 20 years old. He inherited a throne, 20 years old. He spent most of his ruling years on an unprecedented military campaign through Asia and Northeast Africa. And by the age of 30, he had created one of the largest empires of the ancient world, stretching from Greece to northwestern India. He was undefeated in battle and is widely considered one of history's most successful military commanders. He inherited a kingdom at 20. He grew that kingdom and conquered the world. And I've heard it said that he died from depression. He conquered all the land and all the territory around him. He started drinking, there was nothing else to do. So he passed away at an early age. Now that's just hearsay.
Okay.
But he is a great historian, and he was a well-known military figure. Another conqueror. How many have ever heard of Hannibal?
Hannibal the Cannibal.
Say it again, Pastor.
Hannibal the Cannibal.
All right, okay. Hannibal lived 247 years BC to about 183 BC. Hannibal Barca was a Punic military commander from Carthage, generally considered one of the greatest military commanders in history. Hannibal, he was going to conquer the Roman Empire. And we know how powerful Rome was back in the day. Well, Hannibal was going to take Rome. As a young boy, his father made him take an oath and swear to always hate the Romans and to take them down whenever you can. Hannibal was he was a military genius, he was a strategist. And his method was, he would study the tactics of his enemies, and then he would take a look at his own resources and strengths and see how he could best use his own resources against the enemy's resources. And that's part is what made him a genius. And not only that, he used something that no other commanders ever used, and that was he used elephants in his army. And if you can imagine being in a battle back in that day, and you look up and you see 6 charging elephants coming at you with battle gear on, running full speed, which is probably 20 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, elephant speed. That's enough to make you panic right there. Any army would panic on that. Being it's like they had never seen elephants in battle. Okay. Next we come to another commander, and he is very well known. That conqueror is Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar II. He, say again, Brother Charlie?
No, it's Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes.
Yeah.
He lived from 634 to 562 BC. He was a Chaldean king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire who reigned from 605 BC to 562 BC. We can read of Nebuchadnezzar in Bible history in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 1, and Daniel chapter 1 verse 2, as well as many other books of the Bible. Daniel chapter 1 and verse 1 reads, "In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it." Daniel chapter 1, verse 2. "And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, who was king of Israel at that time, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God." Now, what do you think these vessels were? With part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. Nebuchadnezzar besieged Israel. He conquered Israel. And he took some of them slaves. And along with them was Daniel. And Nebuchadnezzar also made a big mistake. He went into the temple of Israel and he took the golden artifacts that had been dedicated to the good Lord. He took that and took it back to his homeland and put it in with artifacts of his God. Well, later on, as most of us know, that's what got him in trouble, because he gave a party and he was partying with the Lord's golden pieces. And all of a sudden, what happened?
See the handwriting on the wall?
Saw the handwriting on the wall. God sent him a message. "Sorry, my son, you have screwed up. This is the end of it for you." And it shook him up. But nevertheless, he was a conqueror. And God set him up as a conqueror to go specifically against Israel, to conquer Israel. God set him up as a conqueror. Okay, moving forward. We have another modern historian. His name is Dwight D. Eisenhower. Anybody ever heard of Dwight D. Eisenhower? Okay. Who was he? He was president. But before he was president, what was he?
Grand Commander.
Okay.
He was a general, wasn't he?
All right. Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was our 34th president, born October 14, 1890. His given name was David Dwight Eisenhower. His birthplace was Denison, Texas. His religion, he was a Presbyterian. His ancestry, he was part Swiss and part German. Occupation, Army officer. Political party, Republican. State and the state he represented was New York. His term of office, January 20, 1953 to January 20, 1961. Date of his death was March 28, 1969. And he died at the ripe old age of 78. Dwight David, known as Ike, Ike was his nickname. That kind of stuck with him. Because during my military days, we had a Class A uniform and you had a Class B uniform. The Class A uniform was had a coat kind of about yay long. And the Class B uniform, the jacket was about this long, came to about your waistline. Of course, you had to wear a tie, always buttoned up. You walk around with buttons over. You had a button. It was there for a reason. You had a button up. Well, that short jacket that we had, the name of that jacket was called Ike jacket, in memory of General Eisenhower. Wore that Ike jacket.
How long you spent in the military, John?
About 6 years. Yeah, I was a regular for 4 years. And I spent 2 years in reserve. So they gave me credit for something. Okay. Dwight David, known as Ike, was born 1890 to 1969. U.S. General and Republican statesman, Supreme Commander.
Be the big man.
He was a big man.
Yeah, so people
Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force from 1943 to 1945. And he was 34th President of the United States from 1953 to 1961. He commanded Allied forces in Europe and North Africa in 1942. He directed the invasion of Italy in 1943 and was Supreme Commander of the Combined Land Forces of NATO, 1950 to 1952. During that war, that meant he was a Supreme Commander.
In D-Day.
On D-Day, he was over Montgomery, who was the British general. They didn't always see eye to eye, but General Eisenhower had the last word. Now, it's safe to say that God put these men in position. God put him there. Otherwise, he wouldn't have survived 5 years of war fighting like that. That was some fierce fighting. And who were they fighting against? In Europe at that time, can you remember?
Germany.
Germany. Germany in Europe, Japan in the Pacific. And if MacArthur hadn't have won, he'd probably be out speaking German now.
That's right.
Place of English. He'd be speaking German. And on the other side of the world, if MacArthur hadn't beat the Japanese, possibility that we could be speaking Japanese now instead of English. So God is the one that sets these people up in office. That's it.
You emphasize that God is the one who set these people up and bring them down. So, what do you think God had to say about Truman dropping the atomic bomb on the Japanese?
All part of the master plan. I think that was all part of the master plan. Matter of fact, he dropped 2 bombs on them.
One in Hiroshima and one in Nagasaki.
I just think that was all part of the plan. There were some that were opposed to it, according to history. There were some that were opposed to it, and then some in favor of it. Because if the U.S. hadn't dropped those bombs, we probably would have had to send 2 or 3 million troops to Japan to try and defeat them. And the Japanese were committed warriors, and they were not going to give up. Sister Son.
Do you think that all these presidents that you mentioned so far base their leadership on the Bible?
I would say yes, as they understand it. I would say yes, even though it's not mentioned too much in secular history. But most of our great leaders were associated with some type of religion that was based, that came out of the Bible.
Some kind of Christian.
Yeah, some kind of Christian religion. And you know, we had George Washington, he was definitely a Christian. And even today, Barack Obama is a Christian. Now, we don't always agree with what he says or what he's doing, but
That's funny of it.
yeah. And then, as we know, Eisenhower was a Presbyterian. So they all have some type of Christian influence in their background.
You know, the Bible says, you know, for the basis of human being, basis. So what you're saying, since God is fallen, never since God is nothing that we mention, water and day. God is a great seller because he's all awesome and he makes allowance. God doesn't say, I'm going to send a storm to do so, but God make allowance to show us the difference between humanity and divine. So it's all about.
Brother Otha, when I get back,
Oh, oh, yeah.
Earlier you said that Nebuchadnezzar conquered the vessels of the Lord. That was Belshazzar. Yeah. Belshazzar. Yeah. The sin of
Were they
Nebuchadnezzar.
related?
No. He was a Mede. I remember Nebuchadnezzar, you said, was Chaldean, right? From Babylon. He was a Babylonian king. His sin was he thought he was God, sitting in the seats of God. Remember, he built that big statue and wanted everybody to bow down to it. And that in itself is a sin. You know? You're not supposed to get no glory, so to speak. But then he was conquered because of his pride. God allowed the Medes and the Persians, which has to do with your lesson with these rulers, because Babylon, the statue that he built, the head was gold. And Daniel said that represented the Babylonian king Ham. And then the chest was brass. That was the Medes and the Persians. And they took over from him. So Belshazzar was the one, I think Belshazzar was Daniel. Belshazzar. Yeah, Belshazzar was Daniel. That was his other name. That was his Babylonian name. But Belshazzar was the you can find it in Daniel 5.
3, 4, and 5.
Which one was the one that God set up in the field?
Nebuchadnezzar made it eat like eat the grass.
And she repented and got the sanity.
Okay. Sister Irene.
I believe it was in last week's lesson, it mentioned Eisenhower. I didn't know this, but I think the point that they were trying to make up is that at that particular time when he was dying, they had just come up with a heart transplant. And his men were so dedicated to him and committed to him, they had several of them that volunteered to give their heart so that he could live. That was in last week's lesson regarding Eisenhower. So,
All right. I accept that.
So he was a good commander then, huh?
they loved him so much they wanted to die. So they weren't dying for Jesus, they were dying for a man. So,
Sister
that's the
Irene, that
whole
was on
point.
the news.
See, I don't remember that. I wasn't
It
that.
was on the news, I heard it on the news.
Uh-huh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we take a look at another superpower commander. That was Douglas MacArthur in World War II. Now, remember, Douglas MacArthur was on one side of the world fighting the war. General Eisenhower was on the other side of the world fighting the war. So, and this all combined into World War II, where we had two fronts. You remember Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
I remember Pearl Harbor.
I don't remember it, but I read it.
Remember they talked about it.
The guy named himself from Pearl Harbor.
Huh?
His daughter,
Yes. We went to the Arizona Memorial
Okay.
in Pearl Harbor.
Well, the Japanese attacked the United States, and they attacked Pearl Harbor. Caught us totally off guard. And unfortunately, most of our naval fleet was out to sea on news. So the Japanese didn't sink all of our naval fleet, but they destroyed quite a few planes, they took quite a few lives. And that was the beginning of World War II for us. And of course, Hitler was on the other side of the world, making havoc with the Jews. How many Jews did he kill altogether?
6 million.
6 million people. That
Those were Jewish people.
Jewish people.
Jewish, not Jews, Jewish. Get
Okay.
it right.
All right, I'll get it right, sir.
Get it right.
Sound like potato to me.
Yeah, really potato.
Potato. You know what it is.
Sound like potato to me.
There you go. There you go.
General MacArthur, General of the Army, Douglas MacArthur was born January 26, 1880, April 5, 1964. Was an American general and field marshal of the Philippine Army. He was the chief of staff of the United States Army during the 1930s and played a prominent role in the Pacific Theater during World War II. He received the Medal of Honor for his service in the Philippine campaign. MacArthur was recalled to active duty in 1941 as commander of the U.S. Armed Forces in the Far East. A series of disasters followed, starting with the destruction of his Air Force on December 8, 1941, and the invasion of the Philippines by the Japanese. MacArthur's forces were soon compelled to withdraw to Bataan, where they held out until May 1942. In March 1942, MacArthur, his family, and his staff left Corregidor in PT boats. Anybody know what a PT boat is?
What is?
PT boat,
A PT boat?
yes.
Like
Anyway,
a skiff, like a skiff.
it's a high-speed small boat, like maybe a little bigger than boats that you see pulling skiers behind them. So it's maybe about twice the size of one of those kind of boats. And it carries torpedoes. And they were very popular during World War II.
President Kennedy served on one of those.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Where you up on it?
On a history book.
Okay. Where they held out until May 1942. In March 1942, MacArthur, his family, and his staff left Corregidor in PT boats and escaped to Australia, where MacArthur became Supreme Commander, Southwest Pacific area. For his defense of the Philippines, MacArthur was awarded the Medal of Honor after more than 2 years of fighting in the Pacific. He fulfilled his promise to return to the Philippines. He officially accepted Japan's surrender on September the 2nd, 1945. That would be a good date to remember. Like, read a quiz or something that says, when did the war end? When did World War II end?
September 2nd.
September 1945. And he accepted MacArthur accepted the formal Japanese surrender aboard, here's another historical item, aboard the USS Missouri. The USS Missouri, thus ending hostilities in World War II. In recognition of his role as a maritime strategist, the U.S. Navy awarded him the Navy's Distinguished Service Medal. I think that's probably the highest medal you can get from the Navy. So what am I saying? Why am I reading all of this? Why am I bringing this? I'm bringing all of this because God has used a lot of people. We just covered a few people that God has used to be conquerors. God brought these men into position. They didn't put themselves in position. It's God definitely says he's the one that sets them up and he brings them down.
I got a question to ask. And listen to my question. Okay? Well, it's not a question, it's more of a statement. But you know, God uses certain people and in certain instances to do his bidding or his war or his fighting for him. Because I know in the New Testament, when you read in Revelation, God is going to use several countries to do his bidding for him before he comes back on this earth. For instance, one of the countries he's going to use is Russia. And that's going to do a lot of killing upon the earth. And a lot of us, we think that these people are bad or whatever. But God sets these people up to do his bidding for him. I mean, that's what I think you're really going with all this generalism.
All right. That was one of God's, I won't say favorite tactics, but that was one of his tactics with Israel. When God get ready to use the rod on Israel, what did he do?
Well, he used other people to use the rod on.
He served as his rod to beat down Israel, to get their attention.
Do you think he want to beat him down? You just want to get because he want to beat him down, boy.
When you say rod,
when
you say rod, that's what pops in my mind.
He said beat him down.
Iron rod.
Rod of correction.
So, Brother Otha, so are you gonna get to the point where, because what you're saying is that,
Sorry, Sister.
what you're saying is that you pointed out some great leaders and you got down to MacArthur. So were you finished with MacArthur? Because I don't want to take it where if you were going to go somewhere else with him. Is that your point as far as all these leaders are concerned? Because there was the reason
I'm not
I'm
finished
asking-
with them, but I'll accept what you have to say.
Okay, because it was something specific that happened to General MacArthur.
Okay.
We all know that Truman fired him in the end, okay? Because his head swelled so big.
Oh, yeah,
that
you're right about
he
that.
wasn't
You're right
going to
about
take
that.
orders from the president, because prior to that, he was given orders, just like the FBI man, what's his name? Hoover, okay? But he was fired, Truman fired him. And so I just wanted to make that point, that, you know, he got so strong that he was like he wasn't taking no orders, so.
Another perfect example. God set him up. He got beside himself. Got the big head. So what did God do to him?
He forgot who was the commander in chief.
That's right.
Cut him down.
So God brought him down. God set him up. God brought him down. Sister Son.
Is that the same way God uses pastors and elders in the church?
I would say so.
I would say so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so.
You're not doing right, he will bring you into judgment.
Because I've seen many pastors fail God, or maybe all fail God in something, but that leadership, when a pastor is called,
Leadership level.
leadership level, the congregation is watching and following that pastor for the most part.
Well, either way you slice it, God sets us up, God takes us down.
Elaborate on what she just said. Really elaborate on what she just said. Because I heard Pastor say something this morning that coincides with what she said. And I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to leave it alone when it comes to these pastors. Yeah. A lot of these folks holler, God called them. God called them. If God called you, truly called you, why don't you tell the truth if God truly called you? If the God of this book, called you, why don't you do right by that God if he called you? When you have most of the people that you look at most of the pastors nowadays, They're not preaching what's coming out of this. They're not preaching this book right here. 99.9999% of it is not preaching what's in this book. So how can you say, stand in a congregation of 15 people and say that God called these people? Why would you say that?
I'm saying that God called people that we just discussed.
Well,
Their
those
lives,
people, these pastors.
their lives,
these
and what they did is a witness for them.
So you're saying Sonia said that the Lord
That's what you said. So you said.
I'm great American pastor.
Well, you know, if these people say the Lord calls them, and they're not doing the right thing, that's what I was saying. Sooner or later, the Lord is going to bring them
What are you
on.
gonna do with them, really?
And you notice, look at it this way. The preachers them that get up in the church and preach about the things them that they hate, they always fall right into it and the Lord brings them out. We have example with Swagger. Look at Swagger. Swagger used to preach about
Prostitute.
the prostitute then. What happened? They caught him right at Black California looking to pick up a prostitute. Twice.
You go on Figueroa, you see gang of these pastors out there doing the same thing he's doing. That's no
Look at the
problem.
guy in Atlanta. He used to teach about the homosexual Eddie Long. What happened?
Oh, boy.
The Lord brought him out again. So you see, if they're saying the Lord put them in this position, and then they're preaching about the things that they know the Lord hates, the Lord is going to bring them into judgment.
If they're doing it.
That's right.
But doesn't that other God call his ministers to preach? That other God, the God of this world, don't he have ministers? He calls his ministers to preach too, right? So that's the majority of these ministers they're listening to the God of this world. And the majority of the ministers listen to the one bad thing that really calls them. And it's money that's calling them. It ain't none of God. You might as well just tell the truth. If you don't say that, tell the truth. Because the majority of the preachers nowadays, if you walk up and tell the preachers in the church, I'm going to show you how much you really love God. You preach the word of God for free. You don't get paid. I guarantee you he'll walk out. I guarantee you that will show you how much they really love God. Because they love money. That's what the majority of them do it for, whether anybody believes it or not. You tell a preacher he ain't going to get paid, he ain't going to be standing up there preaching you no word of God. I guarantee you that.
Well,
I guarantee you that.
I hear what you're saying. But after all, I mean, if a minister is studying the Word of God and preaching it, that's a job. I mean, he's got to get paid. How is he going to take care of his family? How is he going to eat? He's got to get a pair of shoes every so often. I mean, maybe buy fuel for his gasoline. Sister Joyce?
Here's the main stuff. $900 million. If you don't get $3 million, you can die.
These days.
There were 20 years.
But what I'm saying is, we have a pastor package this morning. We have a truth. We talk about these ministers. Most of them God did not call a saint. Because the Bible tells us, don't marvel because Satan got his ministers pretending that they're God ministers. Now, you have to, the Bible said by the what? Fruit? And the Bible said, if they don't bring the truth, then because they don't life in them. So we as believers, we worry about the minister. We should, we listen to them and I'm right. We should make sure that we are in the truth, we know the truth, and we live in the truth.
Amen.
Okay, and it's only one ultimate truth, thus said the Lord. There ain't no more.
Amen.
So the thing is, I don't know when I'm first with these ministers. I see this one guy, Olstein, that man, he opened up and he was telling all kinds of stories, and his church is overrunning. These people that don't tell the truth, the church is overrunning because people don't want truth. They don't want Jesus. One more thing I must say. When I go to the bank and I give a $20 a week, they must say, I didn't make it because they bank was doing this. You know what I say? They say, where did the fellow come to me? We don't believe you do. And we have to get the real deal. And I say this, I'm It doesn't matter where you want to live, if you preach the truth, I listen to it. And I said, as far as I know the pastor, he's going like me, he's preaching the truth. He's preaching the truth, and if he says something, I don't back up, because Otha will come and say, Pastor, respect for your office, where I don't believe this, where it is. This is where our church is. So I just ask the people, you know truth for yourself.
Amen.
You know truth for yourself. And when you know where is the error, if you like it, just stay with it, you don't have to move on.
All right. All right. We've been,
David has.
David had,
oh, sorry, Dave.
Yeah, okay, now see these pastors that you say are behind that pulpit and preaching the word. You say, they're not. Then too, what can you do about it?
I got one.
Isn't it God that brings them down?
Yeah.
Is it, what does he consider them as? What that word he's speaking, what does that say? It's to not avail.
So you say you should leave them alone.
Hey, leave them alone. Hey, leave them alone. You shake the dust from your feet and you go on. Let God take care of them.
Really? You can talk about them all you
And
want, God will take
you
care
know
of
what
it.
you're doing? When you can shake the dust from your feet and go on, you know what you're doing? What are you doing? Are you displeasing God? No, you're pleasing God. But because you're shaking the dust from your feet and you're passing, you say, hey, let God, he be the glory. Let him do his work.
There you go.
You just shake the dust from your feet and go on, and then, hey, let God do it.
Really? Well said.
Okay, we've been on the men's case. We've been beating up on the men. We've been talking about how they've been promoted, how God set them in office. These men that we, two men that we've been talking about. Now, let's flip the coin over. Talk about some of the women.
Uh-oh.
Guilty?
Yeah.
Talk about some of the women that God has set up in the world to high offices and brought them down.
Jezebel.
Okay, all right. I missed Jezebel. I think I probably have enough time.
You missed her?
I didn't have enough time.
You would have liked Jezebel.
And so much about
She's pleasing to the eye.
Yeah. Okay, how many of you have ever heard of Margaret Thatcher?
Oh, for
Iron
course.
Lady.
That's the Iron Woman.
I saw your hand first, Sister Sonia. Can you tell me something about Miss Thatcher?
Prime Minister of England.
Sonia has the floor.
Okay, very good. She was Prime Minister of Great Britain.
Yeah.
And against all odds, she became a conqueror.
Sure did.
So is it safe to say that God made a conqueror out of her?
Yes, so. She was Iron Lady.
Falcon Island.
Margaret Thatcher, former British Prime Minister. Name was Margaret Hilda Thatcher, Baroness Thatcher. Quite a name. She was a British stateswoman and politician who was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1979 to 1990 and the leader of the Conservative Party from 1975 to 1990. So she was a very influential woman. And Prime Minister is equal to what, our president or our vice president?
President.
Equal to our president. So I think that's pretty good. I take my hat off to him.
Otha Jones, that's what I call her, Iron Lady.
Iron Lady.
She wasn't born into that
Okay.
position.
Tough. All right, we have another conqueror.
Vulture.
Any have ever heard of Golda Meir?
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah. Israel.
Israel. All right. Golda Meir was a statesman, politician, and the fourth prime minister of Israel. Golda Meir was elected prime minister of Israel on March 17, 1969, after serving as Minister of Labor and Foreign Ministers. The world's fourth and Israel's first and only woman to hold such an office. She has been described as the Iron Lady. Iron Lady.
True stuff.
Iron Lady of Israel politics. Though her tenure ended before the term was applied to British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher had that title also, Iron Lady. From Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion used to call Meir the best man in the government. She was often portrayed as the strong-willed, straight-talking, great.
The Iron Woman.
When women tie their hair up with that ball in the back.
A bun.
Yeah, bun. B-U-N-N-E-D. Bun. Called her the gray bun grandmother of the Jewish people. Golda Meir resigned as prime minister in 1974, the year following the Yom Kippur War. She died in 1978. So she was another powerful person, I believe, that God set up and used her to do great things. Okay, so that makes two ladies that we've talked about. Who's the first lady?
Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher. The second lady was
Golda Meir.
Golda Meir. Okay. We have another conqueror, a lady, female, Rosa Parks. Anybody ever heard of Rosa Parks?
Absolutely.
The black lady sat on the bus.
Tell me something about Rosa Parks.
The little black lady that sat on the bus, where did she come?
Okay, all right.
Oh, you got a bus. You can ride the bus in the front.
Oh, you want to go, you try to ride in the
There's a
back seat?
possibility that if God hadn't set her up, there's a possibility that we'd be riding back of us today.
To this day,
That's right.
really.
No.
We do ride in the back of the bus, the center of the
Not
bus, the
because
front of
you
the
have
bus.
to, you ride because you want to, you
You
choose
want
to do it.
yes.
But if God hadn't set her up, we might be riding back of the bus whether we like it or not. It was wrong.
I'm not going to even go
That's
there.
off the Rosa Parks, brother.
I'm not going to go
My
there.
hand comes off to it. My hand comes off to it.
Mine too.
I like the choice to ride in the front if I like to.
Yeah. I mean, I ride the back of the bus, but it's good to know I could sit up front if I want to, and not get arrested. Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. On December 1, 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and sparked the American Civil Rights Movement of the 20th century. Now, 10 things about Rosa Parks. Number 1, Parks was not the first African American woman to be arrested for refusing to yield her seat on a Montgomery bus. That, to me, I thought she was the first to be arrested.
I'm with you. I thought she was the first.
Okay.
You have a name for her?
Okay. Yes, I do. 9 months before Parks was jailed, a 15-year-old, Claudia Colvin, was the first Montgomery bus passenger to be arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger.
What was her last name again?
Calavana.
Colvin. First name was Claudia. Last name is Colvin.
And she was black?
15 years old.
She was black? Yeah, that boy, I was just.
What's the last name again, Brother Otha?
What did I just say?
Colvin.
Colvin.
So it's pronounced Colvin.
Okay. First name is
Claudia.
Claudette.
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 Oh, yeah, I found her.
Okay. All right. Okay. Number 2. Parks was a civil rights activist before her arrest. Before she got arrested, she was an activist for civil rights.
Right.
Parks was a longtime member of the Montgomery chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which she joined them in 1943. At the time of her arrest, she was the secretary of the local NAACP chapter. Third thing about it, Parks had a prior encounter with James Blake. Anyone remember that name? James Blake, the bus driver who demanded she vacate the seat.
She had a what with him?
Okay.
I run in.
Oh, encounter with him. But before she got on the bus?
He was the bus driver that she encountered about her moving her seat. But listen, we'll get to the details of that. Parks had a prior encounter with James Blake, the bus driver who demanded she vacate her seat. In 1943, Blake, the bus driver, had rejected Parks from his bus after she refused to re-enter the vehicle through the back door after paying her fare at the front. So she didn't want to lose her money. She paid it at the front. She wants to get on at the front.